Hey, everybody, and welcome to our lecture for this week, which is on advanced reflecting. So, we're going to be talking about kind of two different skills. One is reflecting meaning, and the other is summarizing. If I can get us going here. Here we go. All right. So, why do we reflect meaning in the first place? Well, our clients and us, but our clients in particular, because that's who we're working with, we have a lot of noise. We have a lot of influences in our lives. There's just a lot happening to us all the time. And it is very easy for us as human beings to get lost in the noise, right? I mean, whether it be our own thought processes, whether it be things that other people have done or said, there's just a lot going on both internally and externally for all of us. And so, one of the things that can be really helpful for our clients in their work is to begin to understand how they are making sense out of life, how they are making meaning in their lives based off of the circumstances they are in or have been in the past, the challenges that they're facing now, things that are coming up in their lives. It can be really difficult to understand why things are happening to us and how we come about an awareness of how things are happening to us or why things are happening to us is the meaning making process. This is the process that we all go through that tells us anything from who we are and how we exist in the world to the purpose of life to how we navigate relationships with others. It is kind of the underlying belief system, the underlying meaning making process that really informs how we construct our lives and our experience in life. So most of us don't come in with an implicit awareness of this. I mean, maybe you're a deeply reflective individual, or you have done some kind of intentional work around this to understand how you make meaning in life, or what your meaning making process looks like, how you process things, how you create purpose and meaning in life. But for a lot of people, they don't, or especially if they're in the midst of a really hard part of their life, or a behavior they're trying to change, or a challenge they're facing, or a traumatic experience they've had. Understanding how they're making meaning probably isn't on the top of their priority list. So reflecting meaning and helping a client develop an awareness of how they're making meaning in their experience can be really helpful. And so for us, it helps us understand a client at a much deeper level than we might otherwise. And so this is understanding beyond just kind of what their thought processes are and how they identify and the emotional experience they're having. Those are all vital pieces, and we want to be obviously understanding those pieces and communicating those to the client in an empathetic way. But this is getting at a deeper level understanding of, like, this is how this person navigates life. This is how they make sense of who they are and their place in the world and how they interact with the world around them. And so this is a deeper level understanding that, combined with all those other things I just mentioned and a lot more, we can really, really begin to connect with someone and help them be very intentional about navigating their current circumstances or past experiences they've had. So that's why we're reflecting meaning, right? It's that deeper level connection, it's the deeper level understanding, it's raising the client's awareness. And so it does facilitate that depth of understanding. It also emphasizes the client's version of the story. That's what we're working with, right? Is the client's experience, their perception, is what we need to really be paying attention to. So reflecting meaning allows us to do that, and examines concepts of death. So it really does get at this idea of all of us, all human beings, have some type of meaning making structure in place. We just do. It's the only way we make sense of the world. So, of course, I guess you could say if the world doesn't make sense, maybe you're lacking this. But in general, there is everybody has some understanding of how they exist in the world and how they navigate life. So that this is getting at some of those underlying concepts that are going to inform a lot of things, right? I mean, that informs our thought processes, that informs our emotional experiences, just in terms of how we're making sense of things. So this is a really we kind of categorize it or conceptualize it as a deeper level understanding, but it's because it does inform so much that we do view it as kind of a deeper level of understanding or exploration. And this didn't go to the next slide. Let's see if we can get it to go this way. There we go. So another way of conceptualizing this in graphical form is Lazarus's inner circle model, and this basically says that individuals' understanding of themselves and their comfort level in communicating their understanding exists at various levels, right? And so level E here, kind of that outermost part of the diagram, are things that you're just comfortable talking with almost anybody about, right? So these are things that if you were to run into a stranger at the store and strike up a conversation, or you were to meet a new colleague, or something like that. So this is going to be stuff that you are ready to share. It feels very safe to share. It is appropriate to share with just about anybody. It's public information, essentially. And then as we kind of drill down, the next three layers are kind of increasingly secretive is the word that's used in the model, but they are increasingly personal. They are increasingly vulnerable, and they're just getting harder and harder for you as an individual to share because they are more personal, right? They're things you probably wouldn't tell a stranger or even a coworker really well. They're kind of those, we're getting down to the inner layers of your experience, and they're just parts of those that you're not, appropriately so. You probably shouldn't be like readily sharing with just everybody that you meet, that you might just have a few relationships or certain relationships where you feel comfortable sharing these levels of your awareness and experience. And then level A, we kind of think about the core central things. These are the parts of our experience and our understanding of the world and our self-awareness that we may tell very few people, if anybody. And obviously, this is the layer that requires a tremendous amount of vulnerability for individuals. And this is, a layer where we often can work as counselors if the relationship is strong, and we are effectively creating this relationship where clients feel valued and understood and not judged. They are much more likely to get to this level of sharing. And so when we think about people sharing things in the counseling process that they literally may never tell another soul, this is what we're talking about. These are those very private, very vulnerable pieces of a client's experience, and this is where reflecting meaning can help us get to, is some of these kind of underlying very personal things that maybe a client hasn't explored or just hasn't shared very readily with folks. And recognize that like this isn't a set model that everybody has the same comfort level with, right? Like some people will find it much easier to get to the level A stuff just because of who they are and how they navigate the world and how they've made meaning and all those kinds of things. So this model is going to change based on the context of the individual you're working with and their personality and their experiences and their interaction with you, because we're bringing our own stuff into the relationship that always affects the relationship. So I just want to mention, it depends, right? Like everybody has some version of this model, but it looks very different based on the individual that you're working with. Apparently my keyboard is not going to allow me to click over on this PowerPoint. So when we're developing an understanding of our client's worldview, we can think about it in a couple different ways. And I just think about it as kind of inward and outward. So how does a client view themselves? And these are, the messages they tell themselves, or we tell ourselves, because we all have this. These are the conceptualizations we have about ourselves and our place in the world and how we navigate the world and where we're going in the world and all these things. It is the inward view. And so, we all tell ourselves things like the things listed here, right? Like I'm essentially ... I'm a good person. I'm unworthy. I'm unlovable. I'm damaged. I'm intelligent. I'm, whatever it is. We all have identities that are kind of inwardly facing, our perceptions or views, our understandings of ourself. And those change throughout life, right? I mean, a message you might be sending to yourself inwardly right now is that you're a grad student, right? And you probably, unless you've been in a grad program before, that's probably not a message you have used previously, right? And so, like, I'm a dad right now, right? And so, you know, what I guess 6 years ago, I wouldn't have. That's not a message and identity I would have told myself because I wasn't at that point. So this can change a lot based on context and all the roles that we kind of go in and out of throughout life. So it'll vary at different times. And it may vary throughout the counseling process. I mean, some of this might be some of the change we're seeing that, if a client comes in and is viewing themselves and understanding themselves as being an unworthy person, that's something we would hope to see change throughout the process, that a client has a greater sense of self-worth through the work that they're doing. So we have that inward view, and then we also have an outward view. So understanding how a client perceives themselves is important, and then understanding how they perceive others, people outside of themselves, is also helpful. And that could be, kind of blanket understandings like, people are good. Maybe the client is just exceptionally trustworthy, and that may indicate that they trust other people very readily, which could be helpful, could be harmful in some situations, but regardless, it's helpful for us to understand that is how they navigate the world, is they operate from a place of people are trustworthy or people can be trusted. Um, they also might have generalizations about particular populations, and so this could be anything. I think this is what kind of the second and the fourth bullet point, although I feel like a word might be missing off of that fourth bullet point. But it's this idea that, this group of people is blank. And so it's a understanding they may have about a particular demographic, about a particular psychographic, about a particular identity or geographical region, whatever it is. It could be any kind of group, but it is their understanding of that, whatever that group is, can help us understand their worldview and kind of where they're coming from. Do clients might say things like, that things happen for a reason. So they're kind of indicating that they believe in some form of determinism, to whatever degree that might be for them. Clients might say things like it is what it is, and that could be a kind of a realist viewpoint to take. So there's all these little subtleties that, based on our understanding and experience with a client, we may begin to understand how they view the world themselves, how they view other individuals, but kind of this is how this person's navigating life. All right. So meaning is usually implicit, but what that means is that clients don't usually come out and say it explicitly. Like, here's how I navigate the world, counselor. So what that means is that we have to look for it. We have to be thinking about the unsaid parts of a client's experience in the world. So to do that, we listen, right? I mean, we begin to form an understanding of the clients, the content that they're giving us in terms of, the stories they're telling us or experiences they're sharing, their emotional experience, which, we've talked about is both sometimes said and sometimes unsaid, understanding whatever the situation is, whether it's kind of a current situation they're describing, something they are currently struggling with or going through, whether it's a past experience that they've had that they are still struggling with today, the after effects of it. Understanding a client's kind of belief system and values is really critical. That again is another one of those shapers of how people experience the world or view the world, and then relying on our intuition some. And this is an interesting piece because it is saying that, I mean, because a client isn't explicitly saying, "Here's how I make meaning in the world, counselor. Take and use this to help me." A lot of this is just stuff we're picking up on, and we can pick up on kind of random data points throughout our experience with a client, and we may not fully understand in kind of an analytical way why we are able to piece that stuff together, but we're still able to piece it together, and it makes sense intuitively to us that a client views the world this way. But we may not be able to in the moment. So what I'm trying to articulate here, and I'm not doing a great job, is that we will have moments where it dawns on you that, oh, this is someone who navigates the world in this way, or this is someone who experiences the world in this way. And in that moment, that kind of intuitive awareness or realization, when you're having it, you won't be able to go back and say, because in session 2, the client said this, or, last September when they had this behavior issue in the classroom, this is what they said. You may not remember all the data points, but there's good evidence that our brain can keep track of data points that we're not aware of and tie them all together at some point, and it dawns on us as an intuition. So pay attention to those. I think is the message here, right? Like you're intuiting something for a reason, and that can be a really helpful piece of the counseling process in terms of raising awareness around a client's meaning making process. All right, so I know it can be helpful as we're learning these things for like a concrete, here's how you say this. Excuse me, got a tickle in my throat. So here is a generic meaning reflection formula. Obviously, as with all of the reflections we've talked about thus far, there's lots of ways to structure them. But it can be helpful when you're first learning it, especially to have kind of like a formula. So you feel blank, plug in an emotion. When blank, plug in some content or a situation because blank, the meaning part, right? And so it could be something as simple as, I'm just going to come up with an example. You felt angry when he said that to you because you have a egalitarian way of viewing the world, right? And so you're getting at the emotional experience, you're getting at the situation, and then you're getting at this like typically unsaid underlying meaning making process, like all people are equal. That's what I was trying to get at with the egalitarian way of viewing the world. And so what that does is that last piece again is typically unsaid by the client, and so we're just highlighting that. We're raising their level of awareness around that so that they can better understand why it is they're getting angry, right? I mean, they may know that, but they may not. And so using a reflection of meaning can help highlight that underlying process that's happening that is really more about how the client views the world, and then how that way of viewing the world and navigating the world is interacting with the content, the situation in this experience to create an emotional reaction. Okay, so that's reflecting meaning. It's like simplistic in terms of the concept and the structure of it. It's hard to do because again, these are underlying things. They're very subtle sometimes. They're not always these kind of overt, explicit things, and you may not go there with every client. It may not be that every client you work with, you're going to engage in this kind of thorough, deep level meaning making process, but when it happens, it can be really impactful and it can be really helpful for clients to understand how their meaning making process is influencing their life. So the second skill we're talking about this week, and this is a one slide skill. But it's summarizing. And I think all of us intuitively know what a summary is. I mean, just, from education and writing and other areas of life where a summary might have been presented, but essentially what we're doing is we're kind of packaging up similar to a reflection, but a summary in counseling techniques has a very specific purpose to it. So it's not simply a reflection trying to show that we're tracking with a client or trying to demonstrate empathy to a client. A summary is used as a tool for navigating a particular point in a conversation, a dialogue with a client. And so there's 4 different kinds of summaries. There's 4 different purposes to this tool of summarizing. The first is focusing. And so what that is if you have a client who has talked about maybe a lot of different things, or a client that is just talking a lot, just in general, and you're wanting to both communicate that you've been listening and you understand what they're talking about, and you want to bring it down to a point of focus. A focusing summary is used for that purpose. So if when we're working with a client and maybe we are, I don't know, 20 minutes into a session, if it's a typical outpatient session, or even in a few minutes if you're working with a client, a focusing summary is going to help you communicate by reflecting back in a very succinct way. Here's what we've talked about. But then it is at the very end, typically, of a focusing summary, you're going to bring all that down to like one point that you're wanting the client to focus on moving forward. And so this is a technique to do exactly what the title is. It helps bring focus to a point in a session. So it's a technique that can help a client focus on a particular thing. A signal summary is a way to move things forward. And so you might use, I mean, you may use a signal summary in a lot of different ways. I know I use signal summaries. I find at the beginning of sessions when a client comes in and maybe they're just kind of checking in on how they're, however long it's been since we've seen them, a week or 2 weeks or a few days, whatever it is. A signal summary, I use them to be like, okay, I got it. You had a good week. Let's get to the work. I don't want to say it that explicitly, but that's what a signal summary does. It's like, you've had a good week, a couple rough days, but overall sounds like you've had a good week. So let's talk about the rough days, right? And so it is signaling to the client like, all right, let's get on with it. Let's get to the next thing. So signal summaries can be helpful for that. Thematic summaries, these are summaries that can be really helpful to pull in from either multiple points in a conversation that you're noticing the same kind of thing coming up, or multiple points across conversations that you're noticing things coming up. And so a thematic summary is just bringing those points together and putting them on the table to let the client know that you picked out a pattern. That's essentially what a thematic summary is pattern recognition. And so again, that can be over a relatively short period of time, or that could be over a long period of time. It doesn't really matter, but you are just pulling it together and presenting it to the client as this is a theme I have noticed in our work, or a pattern I've noticed. And then a planning summary is exactly what it sounds like. It is, we are summarizing the work that has been done or the things that have been said, and then we're saying, all right, what do we do with it next? And so this is used very often at the end of an interaction with a client to just, again, overview of what we just talked about, and that can be relatively brief. It doesn't have to be a play-by-play, but overall summary of what was just discussed, and then transitioning into, all right, what are we going to do with this, or what are you going to do with this? And so it's a way to bring the conversation to a close, and also talk about what those next steps are going to be, and so making a plan moving forward. So I think that is it, y'all. That's it. That's the 2 skills for this week. So we're talking about reflecting meaning, those underlying processes, as well as reusing summaries. So 4 different kinds of summaries to serve different purposes, whether we're kind of focusing, signaling, whether we are, I'm not sure why this slide is blank, whether we are pulling out a theme or planning. So that is the 2 skills for this week. I look forward to practicing with you, practicing these in class, and we will see you in class. Bye.